Welcome to Plant Your Seed. I'm your host, Fred Ferris. On each episode, we share stories of how ordinary people have transformed their lives. Each story is compassionate, each story is authentic, and each story is a transformation. Here are the stories of the people who are changing our world by transitioning to a plant-based diet. Today on Plant Your Seed, joining us from Brazil, we have Dr. Eduardo Corassa. Dr. Corassa is a clinical nutritionist with an emphasis on raw and plant-based diets. He is the author of 9 books, 6 online courses, an international speaker, and the creator of Saúde Frugal. Welcome, Dr. Corassa.
Thanks for the invite. Thanks for being here, and hope, I share something good to change everybody's lives, that every one of your listeners' life, even if it's just a little bit, 1%, it will be a pleasure.
Thanks for being here on Plant Your Seed. Now, how and when did you transition to a plant-based diet?
To make a really, really long story short, I was a really, really sick child. I grew up with a lot of diseases. My parents were quite poor back then. And when they had my brother, actually 6 years before, they started they went to the city, they started making money, they became lawyers. So they work a lot. So they didn't have too much time at home. So I was always taken care of by like a maid so I was eating a lot of junk food, playing a lot of video games, and going out too little for sports or anything that, it's health promoting, like getting sunshine and things like that. And then at 17, I became one of the best Counter-Strike players in the world. We were fifth in the world, like five, best teams in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that made me travel the whole world competing in the most played computer game back then.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a shooting game. So we were cyber athlete stars, like the only team Brazil that traveled the whole world competing in a video game. And I didn't know I had to take care of myself because of my health and also because of the game. So I started playing a lot. Every year I was playing worse. So I was like, why am I playing worse? So I tried to understand, and I saw that I started having like back issue. I started having like nose issues. I started having a lot of issues. And then I realized that I was eating a lot of even more junk food that I ate at home. I became 30 kilos overweight. I became sedentary. I was living too much at night because we ended up playing until midnight and things like that. So I understood that if I corrected my health, if I produce health, I would reverse my symptoms, feel better, and even play better. So I started from there. And I went to a lot of medical doctors, pretty famous ones in Brazil back then. And they were all about surgeries and pills. And I was like, no way, they look, too chubby for teaching me health.
Right.
If they don't look healthy, they're more obese than me. How they can teach me health if they're not healthy? I started like questioning, and pills don't make you feel better, doesn't make you perform better. And I was like, I don't want to get cut for surgery if I'm only 20 years of age, 22 back then. And then I started looking, and making changes as much as I could, like getting some lean chicken, brown rice, beans, trying to eat salads also with a kilo of, sauce, those really, sugary and fatty industrialized sauces on it.
Mm-hmm.
But it was as far as I knew back then. And then I was searching, and then I found at the same time, like veganism. And like in a half an hour afterwards, I found, I don't remember if it was first raw foods and then veganism, but I found like raw foods at the same time. And then I was like, I typed raw food diet in Google, And it was like people saying, I healed from cancer, heart disease, diabetes. I'm performing a lot better in everything that I do. And I was like, what? Like and I already tried allopathic medicine a lot. And I
Mm-hmm.
was trying a lot of natural medicine as well. Acupuncture, osteopathy, chiropractic, homeopathy, I was trying all different kinds of, natural stuff. And then I found raw foods. In 3 days, I was like amazed because I could breathe for the first
Mm.
time in my life. Like I could perform a lot better mentally. I was faster. I was like, better in several ways. I was like, wow, this is it. Like I found out what I was looking for. And when I adopted raw foods, one of the things that I usually talk in a lecture that I give, like in vegan events for activists, is that who would eat a lot of meat if we didn't have fire, if we didn't have salt, if we didn't
Mm.
have all the equipment to prepare the meat as we prepare it? Milk, eggs, meat, they have to be cooked or seasoned somehow. So when I started eating a lot more fruits and vegetables, I read about veganism, but I didn't have the science behind it, like animal welfare mentality. I didn't have the science about the environment, and I didn't even have like science about human health.
Mm-hmm.
So I just started eating a lot more fruits and vegetables. I started feeling a lot better, and naturally, I couldn't eat meat because there was some neuroadaptation. I started like, seeing yuck. Like it wasn't appealing to me anymore if I wasn't going to cook it. Even if I
Right.
was cooking, I didn't eat. But still, even if it was cooking, it would seem wrong, because I knew better.
Mm-hmm.
And there is always a neuroadaptation. Like my brain was talking to me like I prefer fruits. It was impressive. I never it never occurred to me back then.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I tried to go back to cooked food, even vegan cooked food, it was like, life wasn't as good as it could be. My day was, I got a little bit more grumpy, a little bit
Mm-hmm.
more easily upset. I was always more, lower clarity of mind. I started having like runny noses, like because of the starch, because of the cooked food. And I started like, really adapting to the way of eating fruits and vegetables in like huge quantities. And then I found through Douglas Grant, an American that lives a frugivore lifestyle for more than 40 years, the author of the 80-10-10 diet. I found also natural hygiene, as we say. It's a model, a medical model, like homeopathy or Indian medicine, or that is Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, allopathic medicine. But hygiene is completely the opposite from all these kinds of medicine because we have the perspective that health is produced by healthy living. There's no way around buying your health.
Mm-hmm.
There's no pill, potion, powder, or treatment. It's health through healthful living. So you have to understand that there's biological laws that cannot be broken. If you break them, nature breaks you. You
Mm.
can palliate symptoms, suppress symptoms with drugs. If you cut out your appendix, how can you have appendicitis? You
Mm.
know, there's no way the organ gets inflamed, and there's no way you have pain in the appendix if you don't have the appendix.
Right.
But we now know by scientific research that not having the appendix raises the incidence of all types of chronic diseases because the appendix holds a lot of the microbiome that we need the microbiota that we need to replenish the intestinal microbiota if we lose them.
Mm-hmm.
So you cannot cut out an organ without having side effects, So natural hygiene is all about this, changing the perspective. Because when you're taking a pill, you think you're like, doing what you need to do to treat that disease. But no, you're just turning off the fire alarm, but you're not putting out the fire.
Right.
You are actually making the fire burn more, but you're just not hearing the alarm with drugs. So natural hygienes come from completely different perspective. Health should be the normal, but if you don't sleep the way you should, eat the way you should, exercise the way you should, throughout millions of years of evolution that molded or genome, molded, created, sharpened or genome,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to get the benefits you should. So you cannot change sleep for coffee in the morning. There's no, coffee doesn't make the things that sleep does. Or if you're not managing to go to sleep, it's not just taking a melatonin pill and going to sleep earlier. It's not going to have the same effect as having normal melatonin levels because the thing is way more deep than just melatonin. It's an interaction with several hormones, genes, microbiome, metabolism, hormones. It's a lot of things going on in it's like supplementing antioxidants. We know for decades now that antioxidant supplementation does not have the same health effect as antioxidants coming from food.
Mm-hmm.
So it's no, uh, we are trying to substitute for air, sunshine, exercise with synthetic substitutes that were not adapted for our genome for like millions of years. So there's no substitute. You're going to pay a price. So when I understood all of that, the natural hygiene perspective, I changed my life. I did a 24-day water fast. I swear to myself that I was going to spread this message because it saved my life. I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be here nowadays if it wasn't for this. In the first year, I ended up getting so much information that, also a plant based way of eating, not just for me, but because it's the most, uh, not just sustainable, the most rational way of eating for everything. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to kill things that doesn't need to be killed and that doesn't want to get killed. So why killing it? So I I thought it was I saw so much, so much to it that I couldn't go back. I didn't want to go back. And this has been my life, like trying to be as much as I possibly can a light to the world instead of chaos to the world because everybody is like there's a Harvard research scientific paper published from Harvard that if you have one friend that is obese, you have 67% of also becoming obese.
Mm-hmm.
So the better we live, the better we take this message to the world because you are a whole model for everybody around you. So people just see me eating a lot of fruit. They stop being scared of fruit. And it's quite funny because anthropoid primates shouldn't be scared of fruit. Telling a gorilla, a chimpanzee, a bonobo, or orangutan, father chimp shouldn't need to educate his son chimp that fruit is good for him.
Mm.
It's in his biology, in his neurochemistry, it's in his DNA to understand naturally that fruit is the food for primates. And although most human beings don't like to be called as primates, we are classified by our biology as primates. So that became my goal in life to make the world a better place.
So many great points that you made in there. Everything from doctors who just, I think you said they were a little chubby, and, and they're trying to tell you about
Just
health.
a little bit.
So I mean that's a huge thing, and that you had better breathing, better clarity, I'm curious about a couple of things. One, how important do you feel sleep is?
I agree with Matthew Walker. I don't know if you know him.
Mm-hmm.
It's the pillar for everything. After studying his work and like trying to pay more attention to sleep and starting doing sleep research, like I always said that to my patients, and one thing I learned with Doug Rand was your health is as good as its weakest link.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't sleep right, you cannot manage your weight right. So you get like overweight, you don't get energy to exercise, you don't get motivation to eat a more uh, whole food diet. You don't get out in the sunshine because you're always sleeping until too late. And there's a lot of changes that happen.
Mm-hmm.
So it damages the other parts. So I think sleep is the pillar for all the other pillars. I agree with that with Matthew Walker. But the the part I like to emphasize is although sleep is the pillar, the primary pillar, it's like what we're doing nowadays with our diet is like sleeping 2 or 3 hours per day. Because sleep, we usually sleep from 7 to 9 hours, depending on the person. We still an average 7 to 8 hours.
Mm-hmm.
But with diet, we went from fruits and vegetables directly from the trees for millions of years of evolution, the Garden of Eden diet,
Mm-hmm.
to eating fried food, like a lot of industrialized with chemicals in it and plastic, microplastic coming into it, and like eating at midnight because there's chrono disruption from electric lights, so we end up making so much more mistakes
Mm.
on the food subject that food becomes a lot more important to the actual moment that we live in history. It's not that food is more important. It's just that what we do with food nowadays is like sleeping just 2 hours a day, in my humble opinion.
Mm-hmm.
That's why food becomes way more important than sleep in the present moment.
Now, when you mentioned you did a 24-day water fast, why did you decide to do that?
First of all, when I was a kid, I had no appetite whatsoever, no real hunger. Appetite and hunger is different, right? No real hunger to natural, wholesome foods. But I had appetite for everything industrialized. So a banana, no. Lettuce, no. Tomatoes, no. But chocolate, fried food, or anything like that, I could eat it. So when I noticed that from the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
and when I adopted the raw food diet, that was pretty much obvious for from my neurofeedback. Your brain talks to you, your whole biology talks to you, and the brain, my body was saying like, I need some fast, I need some time off. I'm not feeling good. I don't need food, even fruits and vegetables. Although I felt a lot better with it, I knew my body needed rest. So it was obvious. But the raw food movement talks a lot about fasting. And I started reading about it. Back then, there was not too much science behind it. And I didn't know how to use PubMed and all these Google academic, research models to research scientific research.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know how to open and, what to read, what were the best scientists to read and things like that. But because I found Doug Grant, he was also a fasting supervisor, and he suggested me to read Herbert Shelton. It was an American from Texas. You know Herbert Shelton?
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Shelton? He's one of my main mentors with Doug. Shelton was dead by the time I was being born, but his teachings, his writings, his lectures were way more advanced almost 100 years ago than our medical doctors and science it is right now.
Mm-hmm.
So Shelton was like probably the greatest medical mind in the whole history of humankind. So I read Fasting Can Save Your Life, a small fasting book by him. Afterwards, I ended up reading 10 more of his books. I hear to like almost every lecture he has online and in audio. It was a game changer, a life changing for me, because Shelton, was right in everything.
Hmm.
Although we still don't have science to prove everything he says, I knew that was, the thing, because every time I fasted, everything started like to working pretty way much better,
Hmm.
So knowing his word, reading a lot of Doug Graham's forum on Veg Source back then, I was, I knew that I needed to fast. I felt it inside of me, my brain, my body, everything was pointing to this. So I was already doing a frugivore, natural hygiene lifestyle for 6 months. And then I started reading Shelton's book, and I started like back then I thought it was going to be 20 days water fast, and then I prolonged it to 24. And nowadays, if I could, I would prolong a lot more than 24 back then. But I was unsure back then doing a 24-day water fast at home. 6 months before that, I never heard about water fasting. I never heard
Mm.
about even vegetarianism. That's something that exists, but I didn't even know a vegetarian back then. So I wasn't I wasn't sure if I could keep going, although my body said I could keep going. I thought it was enough. But nowadays, last year, almost a year ago, 9 months ago, I did a 39-day water fast. So it was
39
my
days.
longest.
Wow. 39 days.
Yeah, that there's the documentary of the fasting. It is in English in Tanglewood, Lauren Lockman, Tanglewood Center. He has a channel in YouTube. He's a fasting supervisor that lives, American that lives in Costa Rica,
Hmm.
has a fasting institution over there. Yeah, the fasting documentary is over there in English, and it's in Portuguese in my YouTube channel as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting. I find fasting so interesting. I've gone on some fasts, and the longest one I've gone on is like a 10-day fast of water fast. And I find that after the first couple of days, it's easy at that point. It's like the first day is easy. Second and third day, the body throws the toxins into the bloodstream, and those are the two challenging days. And then after that, 4 through whatever, it just gets easier and easier. And it's just a matter of mental toughness, I guess, after that, just seeing people and everything to that extent. Now, is that what your experience has been?
Exactly. Like you asked me why I started fasting back then, because I knew I would turn on regeneration mode, turn on rejuvenation mechanisms. But nowadays we have a lot of science. If you read out through Walter Longo's research on fasting, True North Health Center in California, it's like the main fasting center in America,
Mm-hmm.
run by Alan Goldhammer, that's also a natural hygienist influenced by uh, Herbert Shelton. So nowadays, I know the science and I know why I'm fasting for. I'm going to produce BDNF, brain derived neurotrophic factor, and becoming more smart every day I fast. I'm going to do autophagy and clean old mitochondria, recycle old cells, old proteins, and I'm going to literally be aging backwards,
Mm-hmm.
rejuvenating. So that's why I fast. But back then I was just trying to heal myself, and it looked a lot more promising than surgery and pills, So and I could see my skin getting better, everything getting better. So I kept going because I kept feeling better. But yeah, the first days are for sure the worst. But after 20 days, it starts to get really, 20 days start getting really boring. Like fasting is the most miraculous thing ever, but at the same time, hard mentally,
Mm.
not just because you're not eating, but because life goes on so slow that it looks like, like it takes like 1 year in 30 days,
How can fasting help treat illness and improve our health?
I always like to give two answers to the same question. One is logical and the other is scientific. The logical part is every animal in nature and every plant. For example, I cut down a tree, a siriguela tree here in my garden. It's a really huge tree.
Mm-hmm.
With an axe, I just cut it down. The trunk was cut. Like the trunk, there's no more connected to the earth. There's no more the roots. It's still growing like new branches. Like that was a month and a half,
Hmm.
and still trying to regenerate and to grow back. Like what? I'm still impressed. I go throughout the trunk that all every day on my gate, and it's like trying to still grow. Like where's the energy? Where's the food? It still didn't die of a thirst
Mm-hmm.
because there's no water going to it. Like I'm like what? So I can cut down, like I can cut a branch of like a mulberry and plant the part of it,
Mm-hmm.
and it grow roots again.
Right.
Just a small branch. So it's pretty impressive if you look at nature. There's way too many indicatives of regeneration through autophagy. The plant is doing autophagy. He's living off its own reserves.
Mm-hmm.
So if you cut out the tail of, have you ever heard of axolotls?
No.
It's a pretty famous animal because he's always they lock him in the lab and keep cutting pieces of the axolot. It's a salamander.
Oh.
It's sick. It's sick from our animal welfare perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But in science, it's pretty common. They lock him in the lab and keep cutting pieces of him, trying to understand what DNA, what gene have we lost from reptile to mammals that mammals cannot regenerate as much as salamanders.
Mm.
So if you see any animal in nature, when he gets hurt, he just stop eating, rest, and fast as long as he needs to regenerate the body part that got damaged.
Mm.
So we can see out in nature several examples: dogs, trees, and salamanders, worms. For example, you can cut a worm in three parts, and just the tail. He grows his stomach and head back, and grow
Mm.
a new worm. So it's quite common in nature. Every animal fast, and every uh, old civilization. There's uh, a Zulu quote, a Zulu adage. They used to say, a constant stuffed stomach cannot see hidden things.
Mm.
And now we know that fasting increases BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Even uh, Aristotle and the other Greek philosopher, mathematician, used to say that they only teach students after they fast for 40 days, because before that they weren't capable to understanding what they had to teach.
Mm.
So fasting brings such a mental clarity that it's like, so I'm talking about brain regeneration right now
Mm-hmm.
through BDNF, right? But you can go out through every kind of, like Longo has shown that fasting increases differential stress, cell differentiation stress resistance. For example, the normal cells, when they are fasting, they get stress, they raise their resistance from any damage whatsoever. But the cancer cells doesn't have that mechanism. It still get damaged as much as when you're not fasting.
Mm-hmm.
So when you start to fast and give chemotherapy, you end up damaging the cells that only the cancer cells and the normal cells can live. I don't agree with chemotherapy, by
Mm.
the way. I'm a hygienist. I don't believe in these pills, potions, and chemotherapy was a drug, was a chemical war, a war drug. It was a poison created for war.
Mm-hmm.
It kills soldiers during the war. So they just changed the formula a little bit. It was called mustard gas during the Second War.
Mm.
That's how chemotherapy was developed. I don't agree with chemotherapy throughout. I have a book on cancer that gives a lot of scientific data to it.
Mm-hmm.
But every kind of person should choose what kind of treatment they want. I'm not in favor of putting people into certain treatments. You got to research and do you know weigh the pros and cons and choose for yourself. But anyway, we know that, for example, cancer treatment is pretty much more enhanced by fasting. You go for diabetes, you have better glycemic control during fasting, and after fasting as well. You can reverse insulin resistance. You can also, Longos showed in a research paper in Cell, is like the most scientific, one of the most famous and respected journals in the world,
Mm-hmm.
apex journals in the world. And he showed that fasting can induce NGN beta cell regeneration, NGN3 driven beta cell regeneration, something like that, the name of the research. So when he fasted animal models, but also humans in a lesser stance, he showed that in rats, he he turned on a gene that is only turned on when you are in your mother's womb.
Mm.
So that gene is actually to produce the beta cell, the pancreas beta cells. These beta cells are the ones that produce insulin. So in type 1 diabetes, those cells are dead. That's why you have to inject insulin, because you're not producing more insulin, because the beta cells were so damaged that you don't have more insulin production.
Mm.
So with fasting, at least in rats and in a lesser extent proven in humans as well, we can turn on this gene that can regenerate beta cells, can produce them again. But that is only seen, there's no drug that can do that. The only time you turn on those genes is when you're in your mother's womb or when you're doing a water fast.
Mm.
Actually, the research was with fasting mimicking diets. It's kind of a diet that he came up with to induce fasting without having to do a water fast. I don't agree completely with it, but it's what he does in lab animals.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine being able to reverse type 1 diabetes with fasting. So there's a lot of he also has a research that fasting induces multiple system regeneration. So you can start regenerating bones, brain, liver, muscles, heart. So fasting is actually nature's medicine. It's the way nature created to regenerate every kind of living organism in the planet, being animals or plants. But we also know through a lot of research from David Sinclair and a lot of other gerontologists, American famous gerontologists, that international, I mean, because there's Luigi Fontana, Longo's in Italian, that the first organisms in the planet, yeast, already had the fasting mechanism. So the first cell, the first organism in the planet was already doing autophagy and growth, mitogenesis and autophagy. When it eats, it grows and reduces the repairing mechanisms. When it stop eating, reduces growth and focus on repairing mechanisms. So that's pretty much it. Fasting is just turning on the repairing and rejuvenating mechanism.
As far as the raw food diet, What makes it better for us? And should it be organic?
What we have to understand is cooking not only allow us to eat things that we shouldn't be eating, but it causes damage to the food
Mm-hmm.
in two ways. For example, human beings would never be able to eat potatoes raw, right? Only pigs can do that. Only animals that have those big noses that can sniff 100 times more effective than us, can smell 100 times more effective than us. But with cooking, we can eat potatoes. So we have to understand that we evolved with fruits and vegetables. We are the symbionts of the fruit trees. So our DNA got adapted to these foods. For example, if you go without vitamin C, you end up with scurvy.
Mm-hmm.
A carnivore animal doesn't end up with scurvy because he can biosynthesize vitamin C. That means that he can make vitamin C inside of it.
Mm.
But because our foods had vitamin C for millions of years, we lost that gene. Why keep going with a gene that doesn't have any function whatsoever? Because our foods have so much vitamin C in it, so we don't have to do it, you
Mm-hmm.
know. But for example, carnivore animals secrete uricase, that is the enzyme to metabolize uric acid, so they don't end up with gout.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't have uricase, so we end up with gout. So we can see through a lot of evolution and biological mechanisms that we evolved for certain specifics of foods. The macronutrient, the micronutrient proportions in fruits and vegetables are ideal for primates, and no other food can substitute that. For sure, you can live off potatoes, you can live off beef, meat, whatsoever. We know that,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like your cat inside of your house. Your cat can live off whiskas, those cat rations or cat food,
Mm-hmm.
but it it reduces his longevity, lifespan, and health span, as we call in science.
Mm-hmm.
So he's going to have a worse life, less time of life, and less functionality of his organs because he's not getting the proportions that he needs in terms of macro and micronutrients. He's not getting the food that he was adapted throughout millions of years. Because cat food can even have carrots in it, can even have wheat in it,
Mm-hmm.
and preservatives. So we know that cats weren't meant to eat, carrots or wheat. We know they're obligate carnivores,
Mm-hmm.
but they can survive on that kind of food. But surviving is different than thriving. It's the same thing for human beings.
Mm-hmm.
We can survive in different kinds of foods. But for sure, if you look at the nutritional science, fruits and vegetables were the are the foods that are always inversely correlated with all kinds of diseases. So we go for science about fruits and vegetables. We go for cooked food toxins that we call MRPs, Maillard reaction end products. So
Mm-hmm.
when you cook food, you end up creating more than 400 toxic substances. There are mutagenic, teratogenic, carcinogenic, genotoxic, cytotoxic, clastogenic, pro-inflammatory, gerontoxic. So they're toxins of aging. They're toxic to our cell. They're toxic to our DNA. They cause cancer. They cause mutations in our DNA. They cause breaks of chromosomes. They cause inflammation. So AGEs, for example, advanced glycation end products, one of the most famous and studied of these toxins, are actually correlated with neurological diseases, cancer, heart disease, diabetes, autoimmune diseases. COVID is correlated with high AGE levels. So every kind of disease, infectious diseases or chronic diseases or acute disease, are correlated. Even athletic injuries are correlated with high AGE levels. So why cooking if we can avoid these toxins? There's nothing in science suggesting they are good for us. And besides of that, you go for the third point, eating foods that are not biologically adapted to us. All animals in nature eat foods that are biologically adapted to them.
Mm-hmm.
For example, birds are granivores, so birds eat grains. Primate anthropoids are frugivores, so primate anthropoids eat primarily fruits and vegetables. They can eat meat, yeah, for sure. A chimp can eat meat once a month, a small part because he's always sharing with others. So he's not an omnivore. If he eats meat once a month and he eats 90% of his diet from bananas, from fruits, it's ridiculous calling him an omnivore. So our biology don't call them omnivores, just some short-sightedness scientists. So eating foods that are not biologically adapted to us, the cooked food toxins, and the cooked food losses that you cause changes in macro and micronutrients. They're well documented in the literature. For example, vitamin C, all the micronutrients and phytonutrients tend to be labile. Oxygen labile, photolabile, and thermolabile. That means they're sensitive to heat, oxygen, and air.
Mm-hmm.
So what we know from dozens of years of scientific research, that the more micronutrient you have and the less calories you have, the more you live. So why you want more calories and less micronutrients? Because that's what you get with cooked food. If you look to watermelon, 30 calories per 100 grams. If you look to rice, raw, 330 calories per 100 grams. So what do you think you are going to eat less? 1 kilo of watermelon or 100 grams of rice? For sure, you're going to overeat on the rice because even rice for its own, it's not tasty. You have to cook it, you have to season it. So when you throw oil, salt, or sugar in the food, we know by lab animals and now human beings that they eat a lot more than they need. They end up overeating. So there's a lot of issues to cooking food. And no human being have cooked for millions of years. 8 millions of years probably without cooking until we developed fire, start cooking. And 700,000 species on the planet lives on raw foods. Why do we human beings need it? If it's correlated, if these cooked food toxins are correlated with every disease on the planet.
What about organic? Does it need to be organic? Does it need to have seeds in it? What is the best way?
That's a good question, and it's quite easy because we have a lot of research on omnivores and plant-based eaters. And the plant-based eaters ending to have and having a lot less petrochemicals, not just pesticides, but all kinds of petrochemicals in their blood, in their mother's milk, and every way we can detect it through exams. So why do plant eaters that eat plants that are sprayed with pesticides don't have more pesticides in them? Pretty simple. Because Monsanto's Roundup was created to the transgenic soy that Monsanto came up with just to be able to withstand more, pesticides from Roundup. So what does that do is that the cow eats pesticides for like 4 years. So the cow is actually bioaccumulating in its tissues 4 years of pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, rodenticides. So when we're going to eat the cow has so much more concentration of these petrochemicals than normal fruit and vegetable has. But also, the one who pays the most for using these agriculture defensives, as they call nowadays, at least in Brazil, they are trying to call petrochemicals agrotoxics, as we call here, for agriculture defensives in agriculture, agriculture defensives. It's like, trying to give good names for rodenticides, pesticides, herbicide. It's quite funny. So they are lipophilic and hydrophobic. They have fear of water and they love fat. So they stick a lot more to fat cells and they have fear of water cells. So fruits and vegetables have a lot watermelon, melon of water, right? So it's pretty much water in it. So there's not too much petrochemicals getting clinged to these foods as much as to the cow. So we end up what we call the cow does bioaccumulation. We do biomagnification, as we call in biology. We magnify the amount of petrochemicals in the cow for several times because we're eating constantly several cows throughout our lives. So that's pretty much it. And besides of the phytonutrients, they have like we call scavenging. Yeah, scavenging. We chelate these heavy metals, these petrochemicals with these phytonutrients. So we neutralize their effects, their pro-oxidant and pro-inflammatory effects can be neutralized through the vast array of micronutrients in plants. So there's several different biological mechanisms to understand that for sure, nobody's saying that pesticides, herbicides, rodenticides, fungicides are good for you. But even then, they're way less harmful than cooked food or animal products, because most people don't realize it that the rice, the beans, and the potatoes they are eating are still sprayed with pesticides and are still cooked. So you have the cooked food toxins, you have the pesticides, and you have foods that are not biologically adapted to us. So in my humble perspective, in the future, we already have some science, but in the future, we're going to have comparison of a raw food diet, a raw plant-based diet to a cooked food vegan diet, and we will know that raw foods even then are better, even if both are sprayed with pesticides, because cooking doesn't remove pesticides. That's what people need to understand. Cooking just makes the food goes more bad, not better.
Now, how can we change people?
Education. I believe in education. As long as people are not educated about a subject, we are going to make the same mistakes. As more and more people, for example, plant-based eating is become much more common in the internet because we have the commentaries, we have like a lot of information around. So it's a lot more easier to people to make the change. But there isn't too much information around raw foods, and that's why the movement cannot grow. So that's why I start producing documentaries, videos, books, for people to understand that there is a better way to live, because every way you think about it, vegan activism would be enhanced by raw foods. First of all, for example, if you think about it, industrialized vegan food is not vegan food. For me, you cannot buy anything in plastic and call it a vegan food, because birds, turtles, whales, we have seen them dying with plastic in their bellies.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't even need to know about the dioxin effect on reproductive system, on the neurological system, cancer, and everything, because these toxins that are produced with industrialized food can leach out from the food, from the package, from the uh, effluence of the, it's called, I think in English it's called effluence as well, from the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you have a factory and you start producing industrialized anything, you end up throwing a lot of the trash, the byproducts of the production in nature, in the lakes and everything like that. And for example, we have Lake Apopka in the United States. It got pretty famous in the 80s, I think, because the crocodiles were being born with really small penis and couldn't reproduce. And they
Mm.
were like, "What is happening here?" And there was a factory for producing paper. So in the bleaching process of the paper, they throw all these dioxins in the water. So the crocodiles were getting feminized.
Mm.
So even the media call a gender bender chemical.
Mm.
So if we eat anything that is industrialized, we are going to throw gender bender chemicals in the environment. So we are damaging animal health, our health, planet health. So there is no way to think about it. Like, you know, oh, vegan food can be industrialized and there's no worry. Even soy, for example, in Brazil, there's 200,000 tons of soy being produced every year, or even more than that.
Mm-hmm.
For what? For feeding the cattle all over the world. It's not because of vegans or vegetarians wanting to eat tofu in Brazil. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's for feeding the cattle all over the planet. So this soy needs a lot of petrochemicals. So we are throwing agrotoxic for people to eat beef all around the planet. So even us as vegans, if you want to eat soy that is sprayed with pesticides and not come from agriculture, from family agriculture, you are going to be helping the the lobby, lobbying the this industry of death,
Mm-hmm.
because you are going to subsidize. For example, I'm a cattle producer, and I buy like 1 ton of soy, one 1,000 kilos of soy in one buy.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up paying for the soy a lot less than somebody buying 1 kilo of soy in the supermarket.
Mm-hmm.
So you end up subsidizing the farmer to feed his cattle. So there's several ways you can look at the big picture and to understand that we, for example, that understand about plant-based eating should be the ones that are not eating junk food, so we can better protect our own cause, right? The animals, animal welfare, etc. So I think everything comes from knowledge. Everything comes from education. If we got educated from this from birth, that if you eat junk food, you can eat junk food, but you're going to damage your loving ones around you. You're going to damage yourself. You're going to damage the animals. You're going to damage the planet. You're going to damage your own DNA, what we call transgenerational epigenetics. If I smoke, I'm going to damage my children when I have a kid. I'm going to pass that epigenetic change to him. So I don't want to be, the one that is killing myself, killing the planet, killing others, killing my future children, because that epigenetic transgenerational effect can last up for 3 generations. So if I'm eating the wrong things now, if I'm, you know, drinking, having cigarettes, I'm damaging even my own grandchildren.
How do we start on a raw food diet? What would be the first step?
Pretty easy. it's what I say to my patients. For sure, you need education, and that's why I suggest like read, interact with people that are already raw fooders, watch them talking. Being around. If I want to become a tennis player, what should I do? Go to
Practice.
tennis courts.
Practice.
Practice, watch tennis, practice tennis, get tennis lessons,
Mm-hmm.
and be on tennis courts. Be around people that play tennis. They are going to give you tips, they're going to give you insights, they're going to motivate you just by looking at them playing. I'm like, I want to play like that, like so
True.
it's all about being around people that can educate you, motivate you, help you to practice. So the easiest part of being a raw fooder is actually just eating raw foods. If you think about it, the food already comes ready.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at a banana and has those spots in it,
Yeah.
it's ripe. It's just peel and eat it. There's not too much thing to do. So the main part is just increase your consumption of fruits and vegetables at each single meal. That's the main tip.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about it, in the end of the day, if you eat fruits and vegetables in the morning, at lunch, at dinner, you end up eating a lot less cooked food, and then you're already in your path to health, path to help the planet. Because the more fruits and vegetables that we buy, the better the planet is. Because trees are the lungs of the planet in every single way. They help the hydric system of nature, the water system of nature to throw water to the skies and make the rains, and
Mm-hmm.
then this water system, they help like to regulate the environment, they help to regulate the climate, they help to regulate temperature, they make the soil more fertile. It's everything.
Now, what is one project? I'm sorry, what is one thing that's exciting for you right now, either with your project or in your life right now?
Getting my work to English.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that's why I translated my first book, my fasting book to English. Now
Mm-hmm.
it's Hygienic Fasting Nature Surgery. I just received this one from Amazon. So I'm going to put all my 9 books and in like in 1 month, the 10th book in English on Amazon, so people can buy, they can get on POD, right? So you can order directly from Amazon in America. So it get delivered to you. The shipment's quite uh, cheap, and the book is almost 200 pages. And the amount of scientific research that goes in here, the
Mm-hmm.
amount of bibliographic reference,
Mm-hmm.
as we go back, right? Numeric bibliographic reference. So there's number to everything that I say, and the number in the end goes for the name of the scientist, the name of the research, the name of the paper, the name of the scientific paper, the page, the year that was produced. So it's all backed up by science. So that's my main goal nowadays. I did a TED Talks in Portuguese, maybe do a TED Talks in English and start lecturing for the whole world. I already went sometimes outside of Brazil to lecture, one to Austria, one to New York, and a couple to Portugal. But my main goal now is to lecture all over the world about how easy it is to heal the whole planet, human beings, animals, and the planet itself. I'm pretty sure the natural hygiene would be the biggest solution to most of our problems as human beings. And the world would be such a better place if human beings understand the macro and the micro perspective of why we should be living health, because that influentiate our way of seeing the world. So we would make the world a way better place if we see it.
Now, finally, can you give me one word to describe how you felt before you were vegan and one word to describe how you feel now that you are vegan?
Can I curse or not?
Sure, go ahead.
Shitty and unbelievable, like godlike. You know, I felt like shit back then, and afterwards I felt like, godlike. It's like the best feeling ever. You know?
Yeah, so in a way, it made you feel closer to God because you felt so good.
Yeah, not just close to God. You feel like you feel more spiritually, you feel more connected to the planet, you feel better to everybody else, but you feel better with yourself. You can perform better at sports, you can think better. I wrote 10 books. I created a company out of nowhere without $1 in my pocket, because I was so healthy that I could go out and dream and reach out my biggest goals, my biggest dreams. I could dream because back then I couldn't even dream of these things because I was so underperforming in everything that I did that life was not a blessing, it was a burden,
Mm-hmm.
and afterwards it was like a blessing. So that's pretty much it. I just want I really could wish everybody knew how better they could be feeling and performing and doing every aspect of life.
Such a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for taking the time. What is the best way for people to follow you and support you on the web or social media?
Dr. Corassa for all social media in Portuguese. So in English, it's Dr. Corassa Raw Food Nutrition. So I'm on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram. I have a website called Saúde Frugal, so they can see more of my work. They can see documentaries. The videos are all translated with subtitles to English as well. So it's just watch and learn. I devoted almost 17 years of my life to becoming the best of myself, to becoming the best of me, so I could teach better. I could pass the information better so people could understand this a lot better. And, we could take this message to the whole world.
Thanks again, Eduardo, for being on Plant Your Seed.
My pleasure. Thanks for being with you. Thanks for reaching out for your audience. And as Shelton used to say, health through healthful living. Let everybody on the planet be healthy and understand that we could quit this sea of sickness that we now live on just by understanding that we are the architects of our own misery or the architects of our own health.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hope you are inspired by this story, and remember, it's never too late to plant your seed. Links to everything we talked about on the podcast can be found on Instagram at plant.yourseed in the show notes tab in the bio. If you enjoyed the show, remember to leave us a review, and until next time, thank you for listening.